Dr. Elena Martinez stepped off the transport ship and felt her breath catch in her throat. The Zephyrian homeworld stretched before her like a living crystal dream. Towers of pure light rose from the ground, twisting and turning in impossible shapes. The air itself seemed to shimmer with colors that had no names in any human language. Captain Jake Morrison walked beside her, his military boots making soft sounds on the crystal pathway. His hand rested near his sidearm, a habit from years of service, though he knew the weapon would be useless here. The Zephyrians had technology that could turn matter into energy with a thought. "Stay close," Jake whispered to Alina. "Something feels wrong about this place." Alina nodded but kept her eyes fixed on the structures around them. As a scientist who studied alien cultures, she had dreamed of this moment for years. The Zephyrians were the oldest known race in the galaxy. They had been traveling between stars when humans were still learning to make fire. Yet in all their long history, they had never set foot on Earth. Every other species in the galaxy had made contact with the Zephyrians. The blue-skinned Altarians, the gas-breathing Nebulans, the insect-like hive minds, all of them had been welcomed into the galactic community, all except humans. Three tall figures approached them across the Crystal Plaza. Lena recognized them. As Zephyrians from the holographic recordings she had studied, their bodies were made of what looked like living crystal, constantly shifting between different colors. They moved with a grace that seemed to defy gravity. The lead Zephyrian stopped several feet away from the humans. Alina noticed that this distance seemed very deliberate. In all her research, she had seen other species stand much closer to the Zephyrians during first meetings. "Welcome, beings of Earth," the Zephyrian said. Its voice sounded like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "I am Archivist Veltar. I've lived for 70,000 of your years." Jake stepped forward slightly, positioning himself between Alina and the aliens. "Captain Jake Morrison, Earth Diplomatic Corps. This is Dr. Elena Martinez, our lead's an archaeologist." Beltar's crystal body flickered with what Alina had learned was their equivalent of a nod. "The Council has granted your request to study our archives. This is ... unprecedented." "We're grateful for this opportunity," Alina said, trying to keep the excitement out of her voice. "We hope to learn why the Zephyrian people have chosen to avoid direct contact with Earth." The moment Alina spoke those words, all three Zephyrians stepped back. Their crystal bodies shifted to a darker shade, and Alina could have sworn she heard a sound like glass breaking, that is. "Complex matter," Veltar said after a long pause. "Come. The archives await." They walked through the crystal city in silence. Alina kept trying to start conversations, but the Zephyrians gave only short answers. She noticed other Zephyrians they passed would stop and stare at the humans, then quickly move away. "They're afraid of us," Jake whispered to Alina. "Impossible," Alina whispered back. "They have technology we can barely understand. They could destroy our entire planet without breaking a sweat." "Then why do they act like we're going to bite them?" Alina had no answer. The central archive was a massive structure that seemed to grow from the ground itself. Its walls were transparent, showing endless rows of glowing crystals that contained the memories and knowledge of millions of years. Veltar led them through corridors filled with floating lights that responded to their movement. "Our archives contain the complete history of 847 different species," the archivist said. "Every first contact, every cultural exchange, every treaty and agreement." 847, Alina repeated. "That number seems very specific." "We keep detailed records," Veltar replied. But Alina noticed the Zephyrians' light dimmed slightly. They entered a vast chamber filled with crystal shelves that reached up into the darkness above. Veltar gestured to the walls around them. "Here, you will find records of our encounters with the Altarians, the Nebulans, the Crystalline Collective, the Void Swimmers." Alina walked along the shelves, reading the labels. Each one represented a species, a culture, an entire civilization. "This is incredible," she said. "The knowledge stored here must be beyond measure." "Indeed," Veltar said. "We have watched species rise from primitive beginnings to achieve greatness among the stars. We have seen cultures bloom and fade across the ages. Jake was studying a different section of the archive. "I don't see any records about Earth or humans," he said. The other Zephyrians made a sound like crystal wind chimes in a storm. Veltar's body flickered between different colors rapidly. "There are gaps in some records," Veltar said carefully. Alina felt her heart racing. This was it. This was the moment she had been preparing for. "What kind of gaps?" Veltar moved to a wall at the far end of the chamber. Here, the crystal shelves were different. They were sealed behind what looked like sheets of solid light. Warning symbols that Alina didn't recognize covered the barriers. "Some knowledge is too dangerous to access freely," Veltar said. The ancient being's voice had changed, becoming quieter and more fearful. Alina approached the sealed section. Through the light barriers, she could see crystal storage units with labels in Zephyrian script. She had studied their language for years and could read most of the text. One label made her stop breathing. "The Earthborn Protocols," she read aloud. "All." 3 Zephorians made that glass-breaking sound again. Eltar moved quickly to Elena's side, his crystal body now almost completely dark. "You should not have been able to read that," Veltar said. And for the first time, Elena heard real fear in the ancient being's voice. "What are the Earthborn Protocols?" Jake asked, moving to stand beside Elena. Veltar looked at the other Zephyrians. "They seem to communicate without words, their crystal bodies flashing different colors and rapid patterns." "They are," rules Veltar said finally. "Rules created long ago, rules that must never be broken." Alina pressed her hand against the light barrier. The surface felt warm and seemed to pulse with its own heartbeat. "Rules about what?" "Rules about your species," Veltar said. "Rules about why we must never again walk among the children of Sol." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Alina felt Jake's hand on her shoulder, steadying her. "Never again," Lena asked. "You mean you've been to Earth before?" Veltar had already begun moving away from the sealed section. "That is enough for today," the archivist said. "You should rest. Tomorrow, if the council agrees, perhaps we can discuss history." As they walked back through the crystal corridors, Elena's mind raced with questions. The Zephyrians had been to Earth before. They had created special rules about humans. And whatever had happened during that first contact, it had scared the oldest and most powerful race in the galaxy enough to avoid Earth. For thousands of years, she looked back at the sealed archive section one last time before they left the building. Whatever secrets were hidden behind those light barriers, she was going to find them. Even if it meant discovering that humanity was not welcome in the galaxy for reasons that terrified beings who had lived for millions of years. The next morning, Veltar led Alina and Jake to a different part of the archive. This room was smaller and darker, filled with strange machines that hummed with quiet energy. In the center sat a large crystal that pulsed with inner light. "Memory," crystals, Veltar explained, his voice still carrying that fearful tone from yesterday. "They contain the actual memories of our people from long ago. What you are about to see happened 50,000 years ago, when your species was still very young." Alina felt her heart pounding. "You're going to show us the first contact? The council has decided that you must understand," Veltar said. "Perhaps then you will see why we made the choices we made." Jake moved closer to Alina. "Are you sure this is safe?" "The memories cannot harm you," Veltar said. "But they may disturb you greatly." The archivist touched the crystal with one crystalline finger. The room filled with light, and suddenly Alina and Jake were no longer in the archive. They stood on a hillside overlooking a vast blue sea. The sun was warm on their faces, and the air smelled of salt and wildflowers. "This is Earth," Alina whispered, "but not the Earth we know." The landscape was wild and untouched. No cities, no roads, no signs of modern civilization. In the distance, smoke rose from what looked like a small village near the water's edge. A shadow passed overhead. Lena looked up to see a ship unlike anything in human space. It was made of the same crystal material as the Zephyrian buildings, but it moved through the air like a living thing. The ship settled gently on the beach near the village. "Commander Zathera's expedition," Veltar's voice came from everywhere. "And nowhere. The first and last time we walked on your world." The memory shifted, and Alina found herself standing on the beach. The crystal ship had opened, and tall Zephyrian figures were walking out onto the sand. They moved with the same graceful steps she had seen yesterday, their bodies shifting colors in the sunlight. A group of humans emerged from the village. Alina's breath caught when she saw them. They were primitive by modern standards, dressed in animal skins and carrying stone weapons. But there was something in their eyes. Something that made Elena's skin crawl with recognition. The lead human was a tall man with scars across his chest and arms. His dark hair was long and wild, and his eyes held an intelligence that seemed almost dangerous. Kale the Fierce, Veltar said. That is what our records call him. The chieftain of this tribe. Alina watched as Commander Zethara approached the humans. The Zephyrian raised one hand in what was clearly meant to be a peaceful greeting. This was the moment of first contact between the two species. What happened next was not what Alina expected. Instead of falling to their knees in worship, as most primitive species did when meeting the Zephyrians, the humans did something else entirely. Kale stepped forward and began walking around the Zephyrian, studying him from every angle. He reached out and touched the crystal skin, testing its hardness. He looked at the Zephyrian's weapons and tools with eyes that seemed to be taking them apart and putting them back together. Other humans spread out around the beach, examining the crystal ship. They poked at its surface, tested its weight, and talked to each other in rapid, excited voices. They weren't afraid, Jake said, amazement in his voice. No, Veltar replied. They were curious, dangerously curious. The memory shifted forward. In time, Alina saw the same beach, but now it was weeks later. The humans had built a camp near the Zephyrian ship. But it wasn't a camp of worship or fear. It was a camp of learning. Alina watched in fascination as primitive humans worked with crude tools, trying to copy Zephyrian technology. They had built rough versions of Zephyrian energy collectors. Their weapons now had crystal points that glowed. With inner light, children played with toys that mimicked Zephyrian flying machines. In 3 weeks, Veltar said, they had learned more about our technology than most species learn in decades. A young human woman approached Commander Zethara. She spoke to him in broken Zephyrian language, asking questions about star travel and energy manipulation. Alina realized with shock that the humans had not only learned the alien language, but were using it to gain knowledge about advanced physics. This is Lisa, Alina whispered to herself. She was watching the distant ancestor of her own species. And the woman's hunger for knowledge was both beautiful and terrifying. Commander Zethara seemed disturbed by the human's rapid progress. Alina watched him speaking with his fellow Zephyrians, their crystal bodies flickering with what she now recognized as concern. The memory shifted again. Now, Alina stood in what looked like a primitive workshop. Humans had gathered around tables, made of stone and wood, working on projects that made Alina's blood run cold. They were making weapons. Not just any weapons, but weapons specifically designed to fight Zephyrians. Kale held up a spear with a crystal tip that pulsed with the same energy as Zephyrian tools. But this wasn't a copy of their technology. It was something new, something the humans had created by studying Zephyrian weaknesses. They learned our energy frequencies, Veltar said, and Alina heard actual terror in his voice. They found ways to disrupt our crystal matrix. In less than a month, they had developed weapons that could harm us. Alina watched as human scouts returned from the hills carrying detailed maps of Zephyrian patrol routes. Other humans had built crude but effective communication devices that could intercept Zephyrian transmissions. They weren't just learning from you, Jake said. They were preparing to fight you. Yes, Veltar replied, but not out of hatred or fear. They were preparing because it was their nature to prepare. They saw us as a challenge to be understood and overcome. The memory showed Commander Zethara standing on a cliff, looking down at the human village. The settlement had grown in size, and Alina could see that the humans were teaching their children everything they had learned about the Zephyrians. A young human boy, no more than 10 years old, was demonstrating how to jam Zephyrian scanning equipment using a device made from stones and crystal fragments. 1 generation, Veltar said. In 1 generation, they had passed on enough knowledge to make their children more dangerous to us than most adult species we had encountered. Alina felt a chill run down her spine. She was watching her own species 50,000 years ago, and they were already showing the traits that would eventually carry them to the stars. The same curiosity that drove her to study alien cultures. The same determination that sent Jake into military service. The same refusal to be intimidated that made humans keep pushing forward no matter what they faced. But seeing it from the Zephyrian perspective was terrifying. The memory began to fade, and Alina found herself back in the archive room. Veltar's crystal body was now almost completely dark, the color of deep space. "Now you begin to understand," the archivist said. "We had encountered 846 species before you. Or, all of them reacted to us with fear, worship, or submission. You were the first to react with analysis and adaptation." Jake looked at Alina, and she could see her own thoughts reflected in his eyes. They had just watched their ancestors do exactly what humans still did when faced with superior technology. They figured out how it worked and then found ways to beat it. "What happened next?" Alina asked, though part of her already knew the answer. Would be even more disturbing. "Commander Zathera sent a message to our homeworld," Veltar said. "A message that would change our relationship with your species forever." He told the High Council that he had found a species that learned faster than they could be contained. A species that would never stop growing, never stop adapting, never stop pushing forward. Veltar moved toward the door, signaling that the day's revelations were over. "Tomorrow," he said, "you will learn what the High Council decided to do about the humans of Earth." The third day brought storm clouds over the Crystal City. Alina watched the lightning dance between the towers as she and Jake waited for Veltar in the archive chamber. The archivist arrived looking darker than before, his crystal body barely glowing with inner light. "Today you will see the rest of Commander Zethyrus' mission," Veltar said. "What our people discovered about humans during those final months on Earth?" Alina felt nervous energy building in her chest. "How long did you stay on our world?" 6 months, Veltar replied. 6 months that changed everything we thought we knew about intelligent life. The memory crystal activated, and once again, Alina found herself standing on ancient Earth. But this time she was not on the beach. She stood in a forest clearing where dozens of humans had gathered around a Zephyrian, who was clearly not Commander Zethera. "Scout Leader Morden," Veltar explained. "He was studying human tribes across your planet, but what he found disturbed him greatly." Alina watched as the Zephyrian tried to demonstrate a simple energy tool to the gathered humans. It was meant to be a peaceful gesture, showing them how to purify water using crystal technology. Within minutes, the humans had figured out 3 different ways to weaponize the amygdala device. An elderly human woman showed the others how to focus the energy beam to cut through stone. A young man discovered that reversing the crystal's position could create a stunning blast that knocked a person conscious. A teenage girl found a way to link multiple devices together to create something much more powerful. "Every gift we gave them," Veltar said, "they turned into a tool for war or survival." The memory shifted to another continent. Alina found herself in what looked like the African plains, watching another group of humans interact with a different Zephyrian scout. These humans had been given agricultural tools, devices that could make plants grow faster and stronger. But instead of using them for farming, they had modified the tools to grow defensive barriers around their settlements. They had created living walls of thorned plants that could protect them from predators and enemies. "Adaptation," Jake whispered. "Even 50,000 years ago, we were adapting everything to fit our needs." "More than adaptation," Veltar corrected. "You were improving on our designs, making them better for your purposes." Alina watched in fascination as primitive humans worked together to solve problems that individual Zephyrians had struggled with. They shared knowledge freely among their tribes, building on each other's discoveries to create things that were genuinely new. The memory moved forward in time. Alina saw Commander Zathera standing in his ship, surrounded by floating displays that showed human settlements across the globe. Every display told the same story. Humans who had met Zephyrians were sharing that knowledge with humans who had never seen the crystal beings. The information was spreading faster than the Zephyrians could track. Techniques for working with crystal technology were being passed along trade routes. Languages were evolving to include Zephyrian concepts and words. "We realized," Veltar said, that we had not made contact with isolated tribes. He'd made contact with your entire species. Lena felt a chill as she understood what that meant. The Zephyrians hadn't just taught a few hundred humans about advanced technology. They had accidentally given that knowledge to all of humanity. Commander Zathera was speaking to his fellow officers, his crystal body flickering with rapid color changes that Alina recognized as extreme agitation. He was reporting to the High Council, Veltar explained, telling them what he had learned about human nature. Alina listened as Zathera's voice filled the ship. Even though she didn't understand all the Zephyrian words, she could hear the fear in his tone. What was he saying? Jake asked. Veltar was quiet for a long moment. He was telling them that humans learn from conflict, that you become stronger. When faced with challenges, every problem you encounter makes you more capable of handling the next problem. The memory showed scenes from across Earth. Humans who had learned basic Zephyrian technology were already building on that knowledge. They were creating new tools, new weapons, new ways of organizing their societies. Alina watched a group of human children playing a game that involved capturing and defending territory using modified Zephyrian communication devices. Even there, play was teaching them tactical thinking and technological innovation. Children, Veltar said, your children were learning concepts that adult members of other species struggled to understand. The scene changed to show Commander Zathera meeting with a human Alina hadn't seen before. This was an older man with intelligent eyes and hands covered in scars from working with crystal technology. Bren the Builder, Veltar said. He was trying to convince Zathera to stay longer and share more knowledge. Lena watched the conversation. Between the two beings, Bren was explaining something to the Zephyrian, gesturing at crude but functional devices he had built. Zathera's crystal body kept shifting to darker colors as he listened. What was Bren showing him? Alina asked. Ter replied, it's plans for flying machines based on Zephyrian technology. Plans for communication networks that could span continents. Plans for weapons that could bring down our ships. Alina felt her stomach drop. The primitive human had reverse-engineered enough Zephyrian technology to threaten their spacecraft. In 6 months, she whispered. Les Veltar said. Bren had developed those plans in 4 months, and he was not the only one. The memory showed other human settlements where similar innovations were taking place. Everywhere the Zephyrians had made contact, humans were pushing the boundaries of what they had been taught. Commander Zathera stood on a mountain peak, looking down at a human village that glowed with crystal lights. The humans had not just copied Zephyrian power sources. They had improved them, made them brighter and more efficient. He realized at that moment, Veltar said, that humans would not be content to use our technology as we had given it to them. You would make it better. You would make it yours. The memory shifted to show Zathera inside his ship, working frantically on some kind of calculation. Numbers and symbols covered the floating displays around him. What was he doing? Jake asked. Projections, Veltar replied. He was trying to calculate how long it would take humans to develop space travel if they continued learning at their current rate. Lena watched as the calculations appeared on the screens. The numbers made her heart race. 3,000 years, she read aloud. That was his estimate, Veltar said.
Ow.
3,000 years from first contact to human spaceflight. Most species take 10 to 20,000 years to achieve what you would accomplish in 3,000. But the calculations didn't stop there. Alina saw projections for human expansion across the galaxy, for the development of weapons and technology that could challenge even the Zephyrians. He projected that within 10,000 years of first contact, Veltar said, humans would be the dominant species in this part of the galaxy. Alina and Jake stood in stunned silence as the memory faded around them. They were back in the archive chamber, surrounded by the gentle hum of crystal storage devices. 10,000 years, Jake repeated. And how long has it actually been since first contact? 50,000 years, Veltar said. Odd. But we made sure there was no continuous contact. We removed ourselves from your world before you could learn enough to follow us to the stars. Alina looked at the archivist with new understanding. But we developed spaceflight anyway. Yes, Veltar said, his voice barely above a whisper. You achieved it even faster than Zathera predicted. You did it without our help, using only your own curiosity and determination. The ancient being moved toward the sealed section of the archive, where the Earthborn protocols waited behind barriers of light. "Tomorrow," Veltar said, "you will learn what the High Council decided to do about the human problem. You will learn why we chose to abandon Earth and pray that your species would never find us among the stars." As they walked back through the crystal corridors, Alina couldn't shake the feeling that she and Jake were not just visitors to this archive. They were proof that the Zephyrian fears had come true. Humans had found their way to the stars, and now they were knocking on the door of the galaxy's oldest civilization, asking the questions that terrified them most. The fourth day felt different. Alina woke to find the crystal city darker than before, as if the very light was being drained from the world. When she and Jake met Veltar at the archive, the ancient being's body was so dim it was almost transparent. "Today, you will witness the most important decision in our history," Veltar said. "The day the High Council chose the fate of two species." The memory crystal activated with more intensity than before. Lena found herself standing in a vast chamber that seemed to stretch forever in all directions. Thousands of Zephyrians filled the space, their crystal bodies creating a sea of shifting light and color. "The High Council chamber," Veltar explained. "This gathering happened 49,000 years ago, shortly after Commander Zethara returned from Earth." The center of the chamber stood three figures, each one ancient beyond human understanding. Alina could feel their age like a weight in the air. These beings had existed when the galaxy was young. "Supreme Elder Nexthera," Veltar said, indicating the tallest figure. "She has lived for 1.5 million years." Counselor Morden, who believed in decisive action, and Counselor Ylandra, who favored patience and guidance. Elena watched as Commander Zethara stood before the three elders, presenting his findings about humanity. The chamber fell silent as he spoke, his voice carrying the fear that Alina had heard in Veltar's words. "He is telling them about human learning speed," Veltar translated, "about how quickly your people adapted our technology, about the weapons they created and the plans they made." Supreme Elder Nexthera rose from her position. When she spoke, her voice filled the entire chamber like the sound of distant stars singing. "She is asking the question that would decide everything," Veltar said. "What should be done about the humans of Earth?" Counselor Morden stepped forward first. His crystal body flashed with aggressive red and orange colors as he spoke. Lena didn't need translation to understand his tone. He was angry and afraid. "Morden argues for elimination," Veltar said quietly. "He believes humans are too dangerous to be allowed to develop further. He shows the Council projections of human expansion, of the wars they might bring, of the chaos they could create." Alina watched. As images appeared in the air above the Council, she saw human settlements spreading across continents, human armies marching with crystal weapons, human ships sailing between islands carrying advanced technology. "He's showing them what we might become," Jake said. "What you did become," Veltar corrected. His projections were accurate. "Humans did spread across your world. You did develop advanced weapons. You did create technologies that we barely understand even now." Counselor Ylandra spoke next. Her crystal body glowed with gentle blue and green lights as she addressed the assembly. Her voice was softer than Morden's, but Alina could hear the urgency in her words. "Ylandra proposes immediate uplift," Veltar translated. "She believes we should bring humans into galactic society immediately, before they develop on their own. She argues that with proper guidance, human potential could be channeled toward peaceful purposes." Images appeared showing humans working alongside Zephyrians, learning their sciences and philosophy, becoming members of the galactic community under careful supervision. "She wanted to make us like you," Alina said. "She wanted to make you safe," Veltar replied. "She believed that rapid development without wisdom would lead to disaster." She was not wrong. The debate continued for what felt like hours. Alina watched. Thousands of Zephyrians discussed the fate of her species. Some supported Morden's call for elimination. Others agreed with Ylandra's plan for immediate contact and guidance. Still others proposed different solutions. "What were the other options?" Jake asked. "Slation," Veltar said. Some suggested surrounding your solar system with barriers to prevent you from ever leaving. Others proposed manipulating your development to slow your progress. A few even suggested relocating your entire species to a world where you could not threaten others. Alina felt sick listening to the casual discussion of humanity's future. These beings were debating whether to destroy her people, control them, or lock them away like dangerous animals. Finally, Supreme Elder Nexthera called for silence. The vast chamber fell quiet as the ancient being prepared to speak. Did her words carry the weight of cosmic authority? She is explaining her decision, Veltar said. The decision that would shape the next 50,000 years. Nexthera spoke for a long time, her voice rising and falling like music. Alina watched the reactions of the other Zephyrians as they listened. Many seemed surprised by what they were hearing. "Oh, what is she saying?" Alina asked. Veltar was quiet for a moment before answering. "No. She is telling them about another species. A species the Zephyrians encountered long ago when we were young and foolish." The memory shifted, showing ancient scenes that made Alina's breath catch. She saw Zephyrians as they had been millions of years ago, when their crystal bodies burned, with fierce light, and their ships moved through space like predators. "We were once like you," Veltar said. "Aggressive, curious, constantly pushing boundaries. We conquered worlds, absorbed other cultures, reshaped entire systems to suit our needs." Alina watched ancient Zephyrians strip mining planets, building massive structures that blocked out suns, turning living worlds into crystal gardens that served only their purposes.
Ow.
"You were conquerors," Jake said. "We were explorers who became conquerors," Veltar replied. "We told ourselves we were bringing order to chaos, knowledge to ignorance, but we were really just taking what we wanted and calling it progress." The scenes showed the slow transformation of Zephyrian society. Generations passed, and gradually the crystal beings began to change. Their aggressive expansion slowed. Their focus shifted from conquest to preservation, from taking to giving. "It took us nearly 1,000,000 years to learn wisdom," Veltar said. "1,000,000 years to understand that power without restraint leads only to emptiness." Supreme Elder Nexthera was explaining this history to the High Council, showing them how the Zephyrians had eventually evolved beyond their destructive phase. "She is telling them that humans are what we used to be," Veltar said, "but compressed into a much shorter time frame. You are developing as fast as we did, but without the 1,000,000 years of gradual evolution to temper your growth." Alina began to understand the true fear in Nexthera's words. Humans weren't just potentially dangerous. They were potentially what? The Zephyrians had been at their worst, but accelerated far beyond what the ancient race had ever achieved. "She is proposing the third option," Veltar said. Complete withdrawal. The Supreme Elder's plan was simple and absolute. The Zephyrians would leave Earth immediately. It would remove all traces of their presence. It would establish protocols that would prevent any future contact between the two species. "She believes that humans must find their own path to wisdom," Veltar explained. "That forced guidance would only make you more dangerous, and elimination would be genocide of a species." With unlimited potential, Alina watched as the High Council debated this final option. Many Zephyrians seemed troubled by the idea of abandoning an entire species to develop without guidance. "What convinced them?" Alina asked. Veltar's crystal body flickered with what Alina had learned was their equivalent of a bitter smile. Nexthera reminded them of something. She told them that the only species that had ever truly frightened the Zephyrians was themselves in their youth, and humans frightened them in exactly the same way. The vote was close, but Nexthera's wisdom carried the day. Alina watched as the High Council agreed to the complete withdrawal from Earth. In the establishment of the Earthborn protocols, the memory began to fade, showing Zephyrian ships leaving Earth's orbit for the final time. Commander Zethera stood at his ship's viewing portal, looking down at the blue world where humans continued their rapid development, unaware that their first contact with alien intelligence had just ended. The Earthborn protocols were simple, Veltar said as they returned to the archive chamber. No Zephyrian would ever again set foot on Earth or make direct contact with humans. We would monitor your development from a distance and hope that you would find your own way to wisdom before you found us. Alina felt the weight of 50,000 years of separation. But we did find you, yes, Veltar said, his voice heavy with an emotion Alina couldn't identify. You found us much sooner than we expected. Tomorrow, you will learn what that means for both our species. As they walked back through the Crystal City, Alina noticed something she hadn't seen before. Other Zephyrians were watching them from a distance, their crystal bodies dark with what she now recognized as fear. The oldest race in the galaxy was still afraid of humanity. Even after 50,000 years of hoping humans would evolve past their dangerous potential, the Zephyrians remained terrified of what Alina and Jake represented. The question that haunted Alina as she tried to sleep that night was simple. Were the Zephyrians right to be afraid? On the 5th day, Alina woke to find the Crystal City completely dark. No lights glowed in the towers, no energy flowed through the pathways. When she and Jake arrived at the archive, they found hundreds of Zephyrians gathered in the main chamber. All of them were watching the humans with eyes that held 50,000 years of fear. Veltar met them at the entrance, but he was not alone. Beside him stood the 3 figures Alina had seen in the memory crystal: Supreme Elder, Nexthera Counselor. Morden and Counselor Yelandra had come to face the humans in person. The time for memories has ended, Nexthera said, her ancient voice filling the chamber. Now we must speak of the present and the future. Alina felt her heart racing. Beings had lived for over 1,000,000 years. They had watched stars be born and die. They'd seen civilizations rise and fall across the galaxy. And they were all afraid of 2 humans standing in their sacred archive. You came here seeking answers, Nexthera continued. You wanted to? Know why we avoid your world. You have seen the memories. You understand our fears. But you do not yet know the complete truth. Jake stepped forward, his military training keeping him calm despite the overwhelming situation. What truth? The truth about what your species has become, Counselor Morden said, his crystal body flashing with dark red colors. The truth about why our ancient fears have proven to be completely justified. Lena looked around the chamber at the gathered Zephyrians. They were all ancient beyond human understanding, yet they looked at her and Jake like children watching monsters. In 50,000 years, Nexthera said, you have achieved what took us 2,000,000 years to accomplish. You developed spaceflight in a fraction of the time we predicted. You created technologies we barely understand. You spread across your solar system like a wildfire of curiosity and ambition. Alina nodded slowly. Human history does show rapid technological development? Rapid? Counselor Yelandra laughed, a sound like crystal bells breaking. You went from stone tools to nuclear weapons in 12,000 years. You went from horse-drawn carts to spacecraft in 200 years, compressed millions of years of development into a few millennia. Supreme Elder Nexthera moved closer to Alina and Jake. As she approached, Alina could feel the weight of her immense age, like standing next to a mountain that had been thinking for eons. But that is not what terrifies us most, Nexthera said. What terrifies us is that you achieved all of this while constantly fighting among yourselves. Alina felt a chill run down her spine. What do you mean? Every other species we have encountered, Nexthera explained, went through a period of unity before achieving spaceflight. They learned to work together, to share resources, to think as one people. Only then did they develop the technology to leave their worlds. Jake was beginning to understand. But humans didn't do that. No, Nexthera said. Humans achieved spaceflight while still divided into hundreds of competing nations. You reached for the stars while still fighting wars on your own planet. You developed weapons capable of destroying entire worlds while still arguing about borders and resources. Alina thought about human history and realized the truth in those words. Humans had indeed reached space while still locked in global conflicts. They had built interstellar ships while maintaining standing armies. They had colonized other worlds while their home planet remained divided. Most species, Counselor Morden said, become peaceful before they become powerful. You became powerful while remaining dangerous. That's not the worst part, Counselor Yelandra added. The worst part is that your conflicts made you stronger. Lena stared at the ancient being. What? Your wars drove innovation, Yelandra explained. Your competition pushed you to achieve more than any peaceful species ever could. Every conflict taught you new ways to solve problems, new technologies to develop, new strategies to employ. Alina began to see the pattern that had terrified the Zephyrians for 50,000 years. Humans didn't just survive their conflicts, they learned from them. They grew stronger because of them. While other species needed peace to develop, Nexthera said, humans needed challenge. The harder the problem, the more creative your solutions became. The greater the danger, the faster you adapted. Jake was putting the pieces together. You're saying that our tendency to fight and compete is what made us develop so quickly? Exactly, Nexthera replied. And that is why you terrify us. Most species become wise before they become powerful. You became powerful because you refused to become too wise to fight. Elena felt the weight of understanding settling on her shoulders. You're afraid that we'll never stop being dangerous. We are afraid, Nexthera said, that you will do to the galaxy what we once did, but faster, more efficiently, and without the million years of gradual evolution that eventually taught us restraint. The Supreme Elder gestured to the gathered Zephyrians around them. Look at us now. We are peaceful, contemplative, careful in all our actions. We have learned to value stability over growth, wisdom over power. Alina looked at the ancient beings and saw the truth in their crystal bodies. They moved slowly, spoke carefully, considered every action for its long-term consequences. But you, Nexthera continued, show no signs of slowing down. Your species continues to expand, to explore, to push boundaries. You have not learned caution. You have learned efficiency. Counselor Morden stepped forward, his body now glowing with urgent orange light. In the time since you achieved spaceflight, you have colonized 12 worlds, developed faster-than-light communication, and created artificial intelligences that surpass most organic species. Alina realized with shock that the Zephyrians had been monitoring human progress all along. 200 years, Yolandra said. You've accomplished in 200 years what most species take 2,000 years to achieve. And you did it all? Nexthera added, while maintaining separate governments. Competing corporations and military forces that view each other as potential threats. Jake was beginning to understand the full scope of Zephyrian fear. You think? We're going to take over the galaxy, we think. Nexthera said, that you are going to remake the galaxy in your image. Just as we once did, but in 1/10 of the time it took us. Alina felt a strange mix of pride and terror. The oldest, most advanced race in the galaxy was afraid of humanity's potential. But here's what truly terrifies us, Nexthera said, moving. So close that Alina could see her reflection in the crystal surface. We see in you what we once were, but compressed and accelerated beyond anything we thought possible. And we remember what we were capable of at our worst. The Supreme Elder gestured to the archive around them. All of this knowledge, all of our wisdom, all of our careful progress over millions of years, you could surpass it all in a few thousand years. You could become more than we ever were. Alina stared at the ancient being. Is that what you're really afraid of? It will become better than you? Nexthera was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of cosmic time. We are afraid that you will become what we might have been if we had never learned to stop. The chamber fell silent. Alina could hear her own heartbeat in the vast space. So what happens now? Jake asked. Nexthera looked at the other elders, then back at the humans. Now we make an offer that we have never made to any species. We offer to share our million years of accumulated wisdom. We offer to teach you the lessons we learned through ages of trial and error. We offer to help you find the path to peace that took us so long to discover. Alina felt the magnitude of the offer. The complete knowledge of the galaxy's oldest civilization. Freely given. And if we refuse, she asked? Then we wait, Nexthera said. We watch. We hope that you will find your own way to wisdom before you reshape the galaxy in ways that cannot be undone. Alina looked at Jake, seeing her own thoughts. Reflected in his eyes, this was the moment that would define humanity's relationship with the galactic community. Jake spoke first, his voice steady and sure. We appreciate the offer. But humans have always found our own path. We've made mistakes. We've learned from them, and we've grown stronger. We'll continue to do that with or without guidance. Lena nodded, feeling a surge of pride in her species. We don't need to be saved from ourselves. We need to be trusted to figure things out on our own. Crystal body dimmed, but Alina thought she detected something that might have been approval. Then the Earthborn protocols remain in effect, the Supreme Elder said. We will continue to watch from a distance. And we will hope that when you finally do remake the galaxy, you will remember to leave room for the rest of us. As Alina and Jake prepared to leave the Crystal City, Veltar approached them one final time. You have given us much to consider, the Archivist said. For 50,000 years, we have feared what you might become. Perhaps it is time we learn to wonder. Instead, Elena smiled at the ancient being. Wonder is what got us this far. It's what will carry us to whatever comes next. As their ship lifted off from the Zephyrian homeworld, Elena looked back at the Crystal City one last time, somewhere down there. The galaxy's oldest race was reinforcing their ancient protocols, still afraid of humanity's unlimited potential. But for the first time in 50,000 years, they were also curious about what humans might achieve if left to find TH.